The bar was quiet in that familiar end-of-day way. The kind of quiet that feels earned. Soft lights glowed above the polished counter. Bottles stood neatly behind the shelves, like old friends who had seen too much to speak. Ethan Carter wiped the same spot on the counter for the third time. Not because it needed it, but because sometimes a man just needs something steady to do with his hands. He was in his early 40s. Broad-shouldered, calm-eyed. The kind of man life had shaped, not rushed. There was a gentleness in him. The kind you only notice if you take your time. He checked the clock. 9:12 p.m. His son Caleb would already be asleep by now. Or at least pretending to be. Ethan smiled softly at the thought. Then returned to his quiet routine. And that's when she walked in. She didn't belong to the quiet. Victoria Hayes moved with the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of being listened to. Early 40s, poised, composed. With a calm, unreadable expression. Her dark hair fell neatly over her shoulders, and her presence carried a quiet authority. The kind that didn't need to announce itself. She took a seat at the bar. "Just water," she said gently. Ethan nodded. No questions. He placed the glass in front of her with steady hands. For a moment, they simply existed in the same space. Two strangers. Two very different lives. "I hear you never leave early," she said after a while. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Ethan gave a small shrug. "Work's not finished until it's finished." Victoria studied him, quietly. "And if someone asked you to leave tonight," she continued. "Offered you something better, something bigger?" Ethan leaned lightly on the counter. "I'd still finish my shift." There was no pride in his voice. Just certainty. Victoria smiled, faintly. "I'd like to make a bet." Ethan raised an eyebrow, but didn't interrupt. "You stay here all night," she said. "No breaks. No leaving early. No distractions. If you do, I'll make it worth your while." Ethan looked at her for a moment, not suspicious, just thoughtful. "And if I don't?" he asked. "Then you prove me right," she said simply. "That most people eventually choose themselves." Ethan let out a quiet breath. He had heard things like this before. In different forms, from different people. Life had a way of testing you. Not loudly but often. "All right," he said calmly. "I'll stay." The hours passed slowly. That kind of slow that doesn't feel heavy. Just honest. A few customers came and went. The quiet returned again and again. Victoria stayed. She watched, not like someone waiting for failure, but like someone trying to understand something unfamiliar. At 10:30, Ethan checked his phone briefly. A message from the babysitter. "Caleb asked if you'll be home before morning. He misses you tonight." Ethan stared at the screen for a moment longer than usual. Then he typed back. "Tell him I love him. I'll be home as soon as I can." He placed the phone down, gently. Victoria noticed. "Your son?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "He's 10, he said softly. "Still thinks I can fix everything." There was a small smile in his voice. But also something deeper. "Then why are you still here?" she asked. No judgment. Just curiosity. Ethan paused. "Because sometimes," he said slowly, "you don't teach your child by being there every minute." He looked at the counter, then back at her. "You teach them by being someone they can count on, even when it's hard." The room felt quieter after that. Victoria didn't respond right away. She turned her glass slightly, watching the reflection of the light. "Most people," she said eventually, "would have left by now." Ethan gave a small nod. "Most people are tired," he replied. "And sometimes, they've had to choose themselves for a long time." Midnight came. Then 1. The world outside slowed down. Inside, something else was happening. Not dramatic. Just human. At 1:45 nachts, Victoria spoke again. "You know," she said quietly, "I built my life believing that people show who they are when something better comes along." Ethan listened. She exhaled slowly. "But you didn't leave." Ethan smiled, not proudly, just gently. "I've already got something better," he said. There was no need to explain. It was understood. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Not as a challenge anymore. But as someone seeing something, perhaps for the first time in a while. "Then I was wrong," she said softly. The clock reached 2 a.m. Ethan began closing the bar. Same careful routine. Same steady hands. Nothing had changed. And yet, something had. As he reached for his coat, Victoria stood. I don't usually lose, she said, almost to herself. Ethan smiled lightly. Maybe it wasn't about winning. She hesitated, just for a moment. Would you have left, she asked, if I had offered more? Ethan thought for a second, then shook his head. Some things, he said quietly, aren't for sale. Victoria nodded. There was something softer in her now. Not weaker. Just clearer. As Ethan stepped outside into the cool night air, he took a slow breath. The kind that settles deep. His phone buzzed again. A simple message. Caleb woke up. He said he'll wait for you. Ethan smiled, tired but full. I'm on my way, he typed. Inside the bar, Victoria remained for a moment longer. She looked at the empty glass. The quiet room. The place where something small and meaningful had happened. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the need to rush away. Because sometimes, it's not the people who arrive with power who change your life. It's the ones who stay true, even when no one is watching. And in that quiet, steady choice, there is a kind of love that earns its place over time. The next morning arrived gently, like most meaningful things in life do. No rush. No noise. Just a quiet continuation of what had already begun. Ethan Carter woke before the alarm. That had become a habit over the years. Not out of discipline, but out of responsibility. He turned his head slightly. There, on the small bed across the room, Caleb lay curled under his blanket, one arm stretched out, as if reaching for something even in his sleep. Ethan sat up slowly, careful not to wake him. But children, especially the thoughtful ones, they always seem to know. Did you come home late? Caleb's voice came, soft and sleepy. Ethan smiled. I did, he said gently. But I came home. Caleb opened his eyes just enough to see him. And that was enough. That quiet reassurance. Breakfast was simple. Toast. Eggs. A little laughter in between. The kind of morning that doesn't look like much, but means everything. As Caleb packed his school bag, he paused. Are you working tonight too? He asked. Ethan nodded. Yeah. Why? Caleb shrugged lightly. No reason, just. Dawn, be too late. Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. I'll always come back, he said. Not as a promise, but as a truth. Later that afternoon, the bar looked the same as always. Same polished counter. Same soft lights. But something in the air felt different. Ethan couldn't quite name it. And he didn't try to. Around 7 p.m., the door opened. And she walked in again. Victoria Hayes. But not quite the same as the night before. There was still confidence in her step. Still that quiet presence. But now, there was something else. Something softer. Something more human. Ethan gave a small nod. Evening. She returned it. Evening. No bet this time. No challenge. Just two people who had already said what needed saying. She took the same seat. But instead of water, she paused. Coffee, she said. Ethan raised an eyebrow, just slightly. Long day? He asked. Victoria gave a small smile. Different kind of day. For a while. They didn't speak much. And somehow, it didn't feel empty. Just comfortable. After some time, Victoria placed an envelope on the counter. Ethan glanced at it. What's that? He asked. A thank you, she said. Ethan didn't touch it. For what? Victoria looked at him carefully. For reminding me of something I had forgotten. Ethan shook his head gently. You don't owe me anything. I know, she said. That's why it matters. There was a pause. A thoughtful one. The kind that comes before something honest. I spent years believing that strength meant never needing anyone. Victoria said quietly. Ethan listened. But last night, she continued, I saw something different. She met his eyes. Strength can also mean staying. Ethan smiled, softly. Staying's not always easy, he said. Victoria nodded. I know. She pushed the envelope slightly closer. Inside is an offer, she said. Not a bet. Not a test. Ethan didn't open it. What kind of offer? Victoria took a slow breath. A better job. Better hours. More stability. She paused. So you can be home more. Ethan looked at the envelope. Then back at her. And what's the catch? He asked gently. Victoria shook her head. No catch. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he did something simple. He slid the envelope back toward her. Victoria frowned slightly. You don't even want to look? Ethan's voice was calm. It's not about the job, he said. She studied him again. But this time, not to understand. To feel. I've built something here, Ethan continued. Not just work, but a life that fits my son. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I don't need more. I just need enough. Victoria leaned back slightly. That answer. It wasn't what she expected. But somehow, it made more sense than anything else. So what do you want? She asked. Ethan smiled. Time, he said simply. With him. The bar felt quieter again. But not empty. Just settled. Victoria picked up the envelope slowly. Then, she did something unexpected. She folded it and set it aside. Then maybe, she said softly, this isn't about changing your life. Ethan tilted his head slightly. No. She shook her head. Maybe it's about changing mine. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to. Some things don't require answers. That night passed more quickly than the last. Not because it was shorter, but because it felt lighter. As closing time approached, Victoria stood. But this time, she didn't hesitate. I'll come by again, she said. Ethan nodded. You re-welcome anytime. She paused at the door, then turned back. Ethan. Yeah. Thank you for staying. Ethan smiled. Some things are worth staying for. She nodded and left. But not in the same way she had arrived. Outside, the night air was cool again. But something inside her felt warm. Not because of what she had gained, but because of what she had finally understood. And inside the bar, Ethan turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped into the night, knowing exactly where he was going. Because in the end, life doesn't always change in big, loud moments. Sometimes, it changes in quiet decisions, in steady choices, in the simple act of staying true, when no one is asking you to. And sometimes, the greatest thing we can give another person is not opportunity, not power, not even answers, but a quiet example of what it means to stay.